Hello, Josh here. Welcome back to my channel. Today I am doing a part two of a series that I've started, which are political speeches. At least for now, it's political speeches, but it's just speeches in general. Um, so I'm just going to read a speech and give you a little bit of commentary on the speech from my perspective. Um, the first one that I did in the previous video was a speech by Teddy Roosevelt called "The American Boy," talking about what kind of boy we need here in America, and it's the type of boy that will become a good man. So we need good boys to become good men. And today, this speech is a speech that I kind of just picked on a whim. It's one that's stuck in my mind that I've read in the past. It's a speech by Abraham Lincoln that he gave when he was only 28 years old. So it was the early part of his political career, and it's an address he gave before the Young Men's Lyceum of Springfield, Illinois, and it was given on January 27th, 1837. So it's a speech he gave to young men at the time, and I think it's just as Teddy Roosevelt's, or he didn't like to be called Teddy, as Theodore Roosevelt's speech. I think it's it's a good speech for young men to hear, and so I'll go ahead and give you, I guess the speech, and then from there we will talk about it. As a subject for the remarks of the evening, the perpetuation of our political institutions is selected. In the great journal of things happening under the sun, we, the American people, find our account running under the date of the 19th century of the Christian era. We find ourselves in the peaceful possession of the fairest portion of the earth, as regards extent of territory, fertility of soil, and salubrity. How do you pronounce that? Salubrity. We'll skip over that one. It's SALUBRITY of climate. We find ourselves under the government of a system of political institutions conducing more essentially to the ends of civil and religious liberty than any of which the history of former times tells us. We, then remounting the stage of existence, found ourselves the legal inheritors of these fundamental blessings. We toil not in the acquirement or the establishment of them. They are a legacy bequeathed to us by a once hardy, brave, and patriotic, but now lamented and departed race of ancestors. Theirs was the task, and nobly they performed it, to possess themselves, and through themselves us, of this goodly land, and to rear upon its hills and valleys a political edifice of liberty and equal rights. 'Tis ours only to transmit these, the former unprofaned by the foot of the invader, the latter undecayed by lapse of time. This our duty to ourselves and to our posterity, and love for our species in general, imperatively require us to perform. How then shall we perform it? At what shall we expect the approach of danger? By what means shall we fortify against it? Shall we expect some transatlantic military giant to step across the ocean and crush us at a blow? Never. All the armies of Europe, Asia, and Africa combined, with all the treasure of the earth, our own accepted, in their military chest, with a Bonaparte for a commander, could not, by force, take a drink from the Ohio, or make a track on the Blue Ridge in a trial of 1,000 years. At what point, then, is the approach of danger to be expected? I answer, if it ever reaches us, it must spring up among us. It cannot come from abroad. If destruction be our lot, we must ourselves be its author and its finisher. As a nation of free men, we must live through all time, or die by suicide. There's even now something of ill omen among us. I mean the increasing disregard for law which pervades the country. the growing disposition to substitute wild and furious passions in lieu of sober judgment of courts, and the worse than savage mobs for the executive ministers of justice. This disposition is awfully fearful in any community, and that it now exists in ours, though grating to our feelings to admit, it would be a violation of truth and an insult to our intelligence to deny. I know the American people are much attached to their government. I know they would suffer much for its sake. I know they would endure evils long and patiently before they would ever think of exchanging it for another. Yet, notwithstanding all this, if the laws be continually despised and disregarded, if their rights to be secure in their persons and property are held by no better tenure than the caprice of a mob, the alienation of their affection for the government is the natural consequence, and to that sooner or later it must come. Here then is one point at which danger may be expected. The question recurs, how shall we fortify against it? So basically, how shall we fortify against suicide, against us ignoring the laws, allowing crime to run rampant, and therefore destroying people's affection for their government? How are we going to stop all this? Well, the answer is simple. Let every American, every lover of liberty, every well-wisher to his posterity, swear by the blood of the Revolution never to violate in the least particular the laws of the country, and never to tolerate their violation by others. As the patriots of '76 did to the support of the Declaration of Independence, so to the support of the Constitution and the laws, let every American pledge his life, his property, and his sacred honor. Let every man remember that to violate the law is to trample on the blood of his father, and to tear the charter of his own and his children's liberty. Let reverence for the laws be breathed by every American mother to the lisping babe that prattles on her lap. Let it be taught in schools, in seminaries, and in colleges. Let it be written in primers, spelling books, and in almanacs. Let it be preached from the pulpit, proclaimed in legislative halls, and enforced in courts of justice. And, in short, let it become the political religion of the nation. When I so pressingly urge a strict observance of all the laws, let me not be understood as saying that there are no bad laws, or that grievances may not arise for the redress of which no legal provisions have been made. I mean to say no such thing. But I do mean to say that although bad laws, if they exist, should be repealed as soon as possible, still, while they continue in force, for the sake of example, they should be religiously observed. So also in unprovided cases. If such arise, let proper legal provisions be made for them with the least possible delay. But till then, let them, if not too intolerable, be borne with. So endure. Endure them for the time. There is no grievance that is a fit object of redress by mob law. In any case that may arise, as for instance the promulgation of abolitionism, one of two positions is necessarily true. That is, the thing is right within itself, and therefore deserves the protection of all law and all good citizens, or it is wrong, and therefore proper to be prohibited by legal enactments. And in either case is the interposition of mob law either necessary, justifiable, or excusable. They, the histories of the Revolution, were pillars of the temple of liberty. And now that they have crumbled away, the temple must fall unless we, their descendants, supply their places with other pillars, hewn from the solid quarry of sober reason. Passion has helped us, but can do so no more. It will in future be our enemy. Reason, cold, calculating, unimpassioned reason, must furnish all the materials for our future support and defense. Let those materials be molded into general intelligence, sound morality, and in particular a reverence for the Constitution and laws, and that we improved to the last, that we remained free to the last, that we revered his name to the last, that during his long sleep we permitted no hostile foot to pass over or desecrate his resting place, shall be that which to learn the last trump shall awaken our Washington. Talking about the general himself. Let us not ruin what he so sacrificed his life to build. Upon these let the proud fabric of freedom rest, as the rock of its basis, and as truly as has been said of the only greater institution, the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. Many great and good men, sufficiently qualified for any task they should undertake, may ever be found, whose ambition would aspire to nothing beyond a seat in Congress, a gubernatorial or a presidential chair. But such belong not to the family of the lion or the brood of the eagle. Or as a brood, maybe the brood of the eagle. What? Think you these places would satisfy an Alexander, a Caesar, or a Napoleon? Never. Towering genius disdains a beaten path. It seeks regions hitherto unexplored. It sees no distinction in adding story to story upon the monuments of fame erected to the memory of others. It denies that it is glory enough to serve under any chief. It scorns to tread in the footsteps of any predecessor, however illustrious. It thirsts and burns for distinction. And, if possible, it will have it, whether at the expense of emancipating slaves or enslaving free men. It is unreasonable, then, to expect that some men, possessed of the loftiest genius, coupled with ambition sufficient to push it to the utmost stretch, will at some time spring up among us. And when such a one does, it will require the people to be unified with each other, attached to the government and laws, and generally intelligent to successfully frustrate his design. Distinction will be his paramount object, and although he would as willingly, perhaps more so, acquire it by doing good as harm, yet that opportunity being past, and nothing left to be done in the way of building up, he would sit down boldly to the task of pulling down. Here, then, is a probable case, highly dangerous, and such a one as could not well have existed heretofore. Last paragraph here. All honor to our revolutionary ancestors, to whom we are indebted for these institutions. They will not be forgotten. In history, we hope that they will be read of and recounted so long as the Bible shall be read. But even granting that they will, their influence cannot be what it heretofore has been. Even then, they cannot be so universally known, nor so vividly felt as they were by the generation just gone to rest. At the close of that struggle, nearly every adult male had been a participator in some of its scenes. The consequence was that of those scenes, in the form of a husband, a father, a son, or a brother, a living history was to be found in every family. A history bearing the indubitable testimonies to its own authenticity in the limbs mangled, in the scars of wounds received in the midst of the very scenes related. A history, too, that could be read and understood alike by all, the wise and the ignorant, the learned and the unlearned. But those histories are gone. They can be read no more forever. They were a fortress of strength, but what the invading foeman could never do, the silent artillery of time has done. The leveling of its walls, they're gone. They were a forest of giant oaks. But the resistless hurricane has swept over them and left only here and there a lonely trunk. Wow. Despoiled of its verdure, shorn of its foliage, unshading and unshaded to murmur in a few more gentle breezes, and to combat with its mutilated limbs a few more ruder storms, and then to sink and be no more. All right, well, I'm not. Here's my commentary on it. I would say Lincoln's essentially saying that each generation is responsible for protecting, maintaining uh, the what their ancestors have built. Excuse me. Maybe even improving upon what their ancestors have built, but not allowing their hard work to be put to waste, to be ruined, to be destroyed, especially by a generation or even a specific leader or leaders in a generation who are merely trying to make a name for themselves, right? Merely trying to, instead of sticking with principles, with governing principles, with morality that has stood the test of time, trying to uproot and overturn those things for new theories or new ways of doing things or looking at the world that have not been tested, right? That are probably just they're due to fail, but they merely just want to make a name for themselves. And so what we as children of our ancestors, as posterity to those who sacrifice so much from their time, their lives, their husbands and brothers and sons to build, we must also sacrifice our well-being, not only for them, for the past, the people that have gone before us, but also for our own children. We need to realize that, I think is what Lincoln's saying, that unless that we can't just lean on the past either, right? He's saying that those shade trees have gone. They've been dying left and right, and now that all that's left, there's a few trunks. And so we need new shade trees. We need new solid oak trees in the form of great men and women to continue on the legacy, continue on those timeless principles, to continue to continue just the prosperity that has led to America becoming the nation that it became. I think that's all he's saying. I don't feel like I need to say more. I hope you got a little bit something out of this today. If anything, hope you heard how Lincoln's literary style really comes forth. He is one of my favorite speech writers and writers in general. I mean, he uses such, and you'll see over time if you read some of his speeches down that are after this, that he uses very common vernacular, common sense, kind of folksy, sometimes very clever, sophistry even, but he's so he's not trying to talk in lofty terms. He's just trying to give us the bare bones basics, that the brass tacks, as you will, that really speak to everybody. It's not above the heads of your more, let's say, lower educated class. And so I really appreciate that from him. I think he really got to the root, to the bedrock of everything. And so I would recommend reading some of his speeches, and let me know what you think about Lincoln too. I've read this whole book of speeches from him from 1832 to 1865, and I will say his views over time changed, especially when it came to slavery, abolitionism. So you heard him briefly say something about abolitionism, but over time his views definitely changed, obviously, right? So eventually he did emancipate. And I know a lot of people, when it came to this speech, they say that this was kind of him relaying how, like he says here, listen to this. It's very interesting because he's kind of giving us a foreshadowing of what he intends to do in the future to make a name for himself. So some people say that when he's talking about great men and how they aren't just satisfied with being made a congressman, right, or a president and just living within the system that's already been built. They want to create a name for themselves. So they would do possibly things such as tear down systems and create new ones, develop new ones. But he also says that there may be even some great man who, instead of doing that, I'll just say, he said they may emancipate the slaves or may enslave. And so he obviously eventually emancipated the slaves, somewhat 40 years later. And so I would say that maybe he was foreshadowing that those were plans that had crossed his mind. I don't know. But anyway, interesting stuff. Please subscribe if you haven't. I appreciate you viewing this video today. I don't know what my next speech will be that I will be reading and reviewing, but stay tuned. And the way to do that, I would say, is to subscribe. And please like this video if you got something out of it, if you enjoyed it. I appreciate your guys' time. I hope everybody out there is doing well. And I pray that God blesses you all. Thanks. Bye.